Hey folks, I'm Chris and I'm your Commander Mechanic, here with a deck full build, where I'll walk through commanders, card choices, strategies, and upgrades for a deck from scratch. But before we get started, I wanted to remind you that you can win this deck. That's right, we'll be giving away this deck along with 4 other full 100 card decks, and the chance to score upgrades, along with cool accessories from our friends at QuiverTime. Stay tuned to the end of the video to find out how. Today, I want to walk through a deck full build based on our color theory green video, linked up here. We previously discussed how green's primary strength is, well, strength. Green's the color of primal might and brute force, and naturally relies very heavily on creatures, ranging from beasts to dinosaurs to elves and humans. This deck's archetype is a Stompy deck, focused around getting big creatures, making them bigger, and attacking for the win. This is what many would call a Timmy deck, looking at the main psychological profiles of Magic players. If you want to make big creatures and turn them sideways, this is the deck for you. So based on creating a deck of this archetype, I looked at ways we could make a Stompy list that has more synergies, a Johnny's take on a Timmy deck, if you would. And that's where I fell down the rabbit hole of green synergies with +1/+1 counters. That led me to the natural choice of commander, Renata, called to the hunt. This demigod ensures each of your other creatures enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter, giving us an enabler for our counter-based synergies in the command zone. Oh, did I mention? She also has a power equal to your devotion to green, meaning just from having other permanents in play, she can get really punchy. We should find ways to give her trample too. We'll want this to inform many of our card choices in the 99, from spells to creatures to combos. Right away, let's begin by looking at core fundamentals of deck building: card draw, ramp, and removal. Card draw in green, like with many of green's effects, is very reliant on creatures. From casting creatures like with Beast Whisperer, to controlling lots of creatures like with Inspiring Call, to controlling particularly big creatures with Return of the Wild Speaker. Other cards that draw us cards are Hunter's Insight, Garruk's Uprising, and Armorcraft Judge. Again, all creature reliant. Wow, green sure does have a lot of ways to draw cards, huh? Since we'll want big ol' creatures in the deck, it only makes sense that we include these cards that naturally get us ahead by, well, already being ahead. If we can stick a threat with a decent power on the battlefield, it allows us to very quickly enable all of our other pieces to really start humming. Creatures are the fuel to green's engine. Removal for green is interesting. Again, much of it is based on having creatures. So board wipes are bad news for us. When we look at utility, we'll see how we can avoid some of these pitfalls. But if we're looking to remove our opponent's permanents, we have the classic Beast Within, which can take out any permanent and leave our opponents with a comparatively puny 3/3 beast. Acidic Slime is another great enters the battlefield effect that can take out non-creature permanents. Being a Death Touch body on top of that is very helpful, especially when we start putting counters on it. And Reclamation Sage is the same at its base, a creature that can destroy an artifact or enchantment when it enters the battlefield. Baseline good effects. For creature removal, green relies on creatures. In particular, what are referred to as fight effects, having creatures deal damage to creatures based on their power. So we'll include some examples in here such as Prey Upon and Titanic Brawl. Titanic Brawl in particular synergizes with our game plan of counters to give us a 1 mana instant speed removal option. Lastly, ramp is green's core. You cannot build a green deck without some form of ramp. It's woven into the color's identity. And all of the green staples are in this list: Elvish Mystic, Llanowar Elves, and Fyndhorn Elves at 1 mana, allowing us to play 3 drops on turn 2. Rampant Growth, Incubation Druid, and 3 Visits at 2 mana, allowing us to play 4 drops on turn 3, and Cultivate and Kodama's Reach at 3 mana, allowing us to consistently play 5 drops on turn 4, or if we played one of our 1-drop ramp options, 5 drops on turn 3. That's how you stick a threat early and start leveraging your game plan in green. So with our core fundamentals in place, let's look at synergies. What do we do to fill the rest of the list with bodies, +1/+1 counter enablers, and synergies for our big, beefy beaters? Well, first we want to include spells and creatures that make our creatures bigger. With just a couple counters, we can turn a 1/1 into a real threat to the table. But how do we do that? Well, anything that grows creatures with counters should be on our list. Fangren Firstborn puts counters on each attacking creatures, a great way to turn a small attack into a big threat. Bloodspore Thrynax can devour an early game mana dork and give us a super powered version of our commander. Any creature that comes in afterward gets additional counters. That makes Bloodspore Thrynax a prime target to put additional counters on later. Ivy Lane Denizen lets us distribute a counter whenever another green creature enters the battlefield too. If we combine that with token creators like Hornet Queen or Michaeloth, we could be putting a ton of counters on creatures. Oran Reef Ooze is another great way to go taller with a wide army, adding additional counters to attackers that already have counters. Thanks to our commander, we should have counters on plenty of our creatures already. We'll also want to make sure our growing army doesn't get stopped by puny 1/1s, so we'll want to give our creatures green's form of evasion, Trample. Creatures like Aggressive Mammoth give all our creatures trample, but Crowned Ceratok and Pride Malkin also give trample to creatures with counters on them. Fantastic synergies for ensuring we can reliably deal combat damage. But putting counters on creatures isn't the only way we can synergize here. No. We can include Proliferate, like with an Evolution Sage, to turn each landfall into extra counters on our creatures. And Courage in Crisis is a one-time effect that can up the number of counters on each of our creatures as well. And we can include Harden Scales to add extra counters each time we place a counter. That's doubling counters in most cases, which is a fantastic effect. Turns our commander's ability into a threat maker straight out the gate. And in case our opponents definitely want to be destroying our stuff, we have some protection effects. Blossoming Defense can be used both offensively and defensively, giving a power and toughness boost while also providing hexproof, potentially fizzling a spell. And Heroic Intervention gives all of our stuff hexproof and indestructible too. It is a classic gotcha that no green deck should be without. This is fantastic. Make creatures, make them bigger, protect them, and get punchy. But apart from our creatures that give trample, how are we going to close out a game? Well, we have one-time effects that can turn a small army into a game ender. The classic Overrun gives all of our creatures +3/+3 in trample, which can turn a handful of elves into a stampede of pain. Klothys's Design gives our creatures +X/+X, where X is our devotion to green, or the number of green mana symbols in the casting cost of our creatures. Since we're mono green, this means, well, for 6 mana we can give our creatures +10/+10 or more. But one of my favorite lines in the deck is a cheeky little combo I've included, and that revolves around Woodfall Primus, a sacrifice outlet like Ashnod's Altar or Greater Good, and anything that gives creatures a counter when they enter the battlefield. Renata, our commander, Bloodspore Thrynax, or Ivy Lane Denizen. With this, you can blow up all of your opponent's non-creature permanents whenever you want, essentially locking them out of the game. You can also draw your entire library with this combo, which I hear is pretty good. What happens is you sacrifice Woodfall Primus to either generate mana with Ashnod's Altar or draw and discard cards with Greater Good, and its Persist trigger happens, returning it to the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter. Now, if Woodfall Primus dies with a -1/-1 counter on it, that's it. It doesn't come back. But with our effects that put a counter on him when he comes back, we negate that -1/-1 counter, essentially ensuring that there's no counters on our creature. And Primus can die as many times as we want if this is the case. Of course, each time Woodfall Primus returns, he destroys something from our opponents. So, no more lands, no more artifacts, no more enchantments. Goodbye, opponents. Very sneaky and not very quick to pull off, but hey, it's an alternate way to win in mono green. Now finally, when building this and each of the decks we're giving away this month, I wanted to include potential pivot commanders in the list. In this one in particular, I've included one of my favorites, Rishkar Pima Renegade. When Rishkar enters the battlefield, you can put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 different creatures. No, you can't put 2 counters on the same creature. But he does give us the ability to tap creatures with counters on them to add mana, turning every creature with a counter on it into a mana dork. The Planeswalker Jiang Yangu Wildcrafter, also in the deck, gives us this same effect, a great way to ramp out of control. The other option is Jiang Yangu's companion, Mowu. This good pupper gets extra counters whenever you put a counter on him, making him grow very fast. Naturally, having Vigilance and Trample means this dog's bite is much worse than its bark very quickly. If you want a threat in the command zone that gets out of control fast, Mowu is your substitute commander. All told, this deck helps show off what green is capable of, quickly outpacing opponents' mana production, sticking threatening effects on the board, and leveraging this to go wide or tall and straight to your opponent's face. If you're interested in upgrading this deck, there are a few really solid staples I'd recommend. I'd start with Sylvan Library. This is a fast, effective draw engine that can let us pay life for additional cards every turn. And at its value floor, it at least lets us see 3 cards deeper into our library. The Great Henge is everything we want in this deck, giving our creatures counters, drawing cards, making mana, and gaining life. The synergies here are 1-to-1 what we want to be doing. But it has gotten very expensive very quickly. For a recently printed card, this one is bonkers, clocking in at time of recording of nearly $75. Colonian Hydra is a counter doubler on a body, doubling the counters on each of your creatures each attack, turning it into a threat, a synergy, and an engine all in one. And if you want double counters, doubling season, hey, it's right there in the name. Including this enchantment makes sure if you're making tokens, you get twice as many. If you're putting counters on creatures, you get twice as many. And when it comes down, your opponents sweat twice as much. Lastly, any Stompy deck would be remiss to exclude the Hoof Daddy, Crater Hoof Behemoth. If you're making an army of creatures to attack with, then Crater Hoof makes them all unstoppable. There's a reason more games end with Crater Hoof than any other single card in the format. Remember, you can win this deck along with 4 others we're giving away. 5 lucky winners will each take home a full 100 card EDH deck with goodies from our friends at Quivertime, and thanks to our affiliate at Hairy Tarantula. If you want to win, head over to this video for more details. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment on which deck you want to win. We'll be doing the drawing in a few weeks, but there's no time to lose. Get in now! Let me know what you think of this list and what you would add if you were to enhance it. Let me know in the comments below. One lucky commenter from each of these full build videos will win another prize too. Until next time, folks, good luck and have fun!